All right, it is 10 a.m. Eastern time. We are live and let's get started here. So I hope that you are all having a great morning so far. Thanks for joining us for a webinar, DEI Strategy Development and Sustainability. Super interesting topic. Today we're delving really into the core of a pressing question. How can you transform the buzzwords of diversity and inclusion into a meaningful and enduring change for your organization? So I'm excited to introduce to you all our webinar presenter for today, Artie Harrison, Senior HR Vice President at HR Knowledge Source. Hi, Artie. It is a pleasure having you with us this morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Pauline. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Of course. So Artie will be diving deeper into her experience during her presentation, but here's a quick little summary. So she's an expert in talent management, recruitment, performance management, employee engagement, compensation, and payroll. Artie is passionate about streamlining processes, motivating employees, and developing leaders. So it definitely goes without saying that we are in for a very engaging webinar for today. So before we get started, let me give you a quick review of Factorial. So we are an HR software company, and we're focused on empowering people teams to streamline various aspects of their work. So our software automations encompass time and attendance to applicant tracking, performance reviews, shift management, onboarding, just to name a few of our product features. So there's going to be a little slide at the end of today's presentation for you to scan and book your demo today. And I also placed the link to book your 15-minute demo in the chat. All right, so Artie, the stage is yours if you would like to start empowering us with your insights on sustainable DEI strategies.
Thank you, Pauline. It is awesome to be here. Truly is. And thank you for that introduction as well. And just a few little fun facts. I always like to share something a little personal. So yes, I'm a mother and I'm a GG, and I'm also an avid tennis player and a bowler and a cyclist. I've been in HR leadership for over 28 years and as a master facilitator and ELI civil treatment certified facilitator, as well as a DI practitioner and a certified coach. So if we have people in the audience, if you're a tennis player, a bowler, a cyclist, maybe a pool table player, maybe a relay triathlonist, or maybe even a cornhole player, let me know in the Q&A, and maybe perhaps we can have a friendly competition. All right. I want to welcome our international audience. We have people here from Barcelona. We have those from Canada, Quebec, such as Montreal and Tarragona, Sherbrooke, Nigeria, Paris, Tarragona in terms of Spain and Madrid, and of course here in the States, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, California, and Florida. So we welcome you all. It's a pleasure to have you all today. And so on our agenda today, as we talk about this topic, we're going to divide this into two modules. First, we're going to talk about how to develop a DEI strategy, and then we're going to talk about how to create sustainability. And so let's just kick it right off. This particular one. So in this particular module, as we talk about DEI strategy, we're going to focus in on 5 key parts. We're going to talk about the current state assessment. We're going to talk about this idea of a top-down, bottom-up approach, and then assessing your leader's readiness. And then we're going to talk about developing a business case for DEI. And then, of course, bring in thought leaders and experts. So let's just dive right into this. And before we do so, I'd like to ask you a question. So it was in a March 2023 LinkedIn article, and it said that about 32% of the employees and job seekers would not apply for a job at a company if there was a lack of diversity. So if you would, in the Q&A, answer this question for me. It's either a yes or a no. Do your candidates have a way of knowing whether your company values diversity? Think about that. And in the Q&A, either give me a yes or no. Do your candidates have a way of knowing whether your company values diversity? Look for some responses in the Q&A. All right. And maybe some of you are thinking about it. Maybe you're not even sure, which is even more of a telling story. Okay, so I have one no. That's an interesting response there in terms of the no. And if it's okay, is it Sharonda? Do you mind sharing in your answers why you say it's a no? Just a little bit of insight, because that's a powerful statement to know if your company is not displaying in a fashion that candidates would know that you're diverse. What led you to the response of no? And I'm sure she's typing it all out. Okay. And sometimes as she's typing it out, sometimes that no is a result of, if I were to go to your website and I see nothing that tells me you value diversity, either from the pictures that you use or how you promote what you do, it can very well be obvious that, okay, maybe the diversity that may be in play is not obvious to others. And it's quite okay. You don't necessarily have to share. It's okay. But if you do, there we go. It's more faith-based and it's not on the website. It's not obvious. And that makes a lot of sense. And so think about that as we go through our time together today. If this is who you say you are, what is your website? Which is the first thing that people see? What does it say about you? So before an organization can actually move to this next level, it's really important to, really be able to understand, like, what is your current state? What's the as is state? And in order to really achieve like the desired state that the company wants to be in, it's really important to understand your organization operationally and how do you support DEI today. Now, when we talk about a current state assessment, what this does is that it provides you with some qualitative and some quantitative data, and it's showing you where the organization is doing well, but it also can show you where there's some opportunities. It can also show you, for example, a baseline, right? So, when a runner is running a race, you have to kind of know what your levels of engagement are in terms of how far you can go. So you've got to have a baseline. So what this does is it measures your progress. And even though maybe a large portion of the understanding can be obtained, perhaps maybe it's from looking at reports in your company, maybe it's training and kind of maybe even looking at some of the documents, it's really important as part of your assessment to include conversations with select leaders. Remember, that's a key part of knowing where the organization is going, is understanding what the leaders are thinking about. So in essence, for you to be able to determine where you're going, you have to understand where you are, okay? So that's the current state assessment and your why. And I love this idea. Many of you who may be HR professionals, we've all experienced the pace at which leadership sometimes moves. And we know sometimes that can be slowly, right? I mean, that's just what they do. But most diversity initiatives start from the top and they start with the leadership's commitment. So there's this, for example, high level strategy that they develop, which is great. And companies, it'll include like their vision. It probably has, let's say, the missions involved with it and perhaps the goals. But by the time that it gets to the bottom, and that's if it ever makes it to the bottom, a lot of times it's interpreted very differently. And so in the Q&A, if you don't mind, tell me if your DEI initiatives are stuck. If you think that they're stuck, type in a yes. If you think that they're not stuck, type in a no. So in the Q&A, is your DEI initiatives, are they stuck? And I'll give you the that's the Jeopardy sound for those of you who may be familiar with that sound. Is your DEI initiative stuck? Yes or no? And then you can just say, I don't know, because maybe that's something you're not sure about. Okay. And while they're typing those responses, honestly, in most cases, when a company decides that they're going to even focus on diversity, the first thing that happens is the CEO and maybe other top level executives, they will try to incorporate some type of philosophical message, and they'll do it in a variety of company publications. It could be in presentations. You might find it in reports, both internally and externally, to try and demonstrate how their diversity initiatives are being utilized or showing up in their organization. And these are sometimes, they're very well-worded communications, and usually they speak to the value that the organization has, how they respect diversity, how they have perhaps even a desire as an organization to really represent that diversity element in their labor force, for example, in the customer base that they have, how socially responsible that they are, how compliant, for example, that they are with the laws around anti-discrimination, and they wanted to show it in their policies. But, a wide variety of the processes and the policies that companies may develop, they're promoting the awareness, and they're also promoting the appreciation of the differences, and they want to make sure that they're ensuring fair treatment, and they're wanting to increase the representation. And this creates what they feel is a culture of inclusiveness, and that truly is. But while this approach is really good, it's a good way for the upper leadership to visualize and maybe articulate to a broader audience this idea of creating an inclusive environment within their organization. The actual implementation of these types of concepts, and when they're trying to do it throughout the organization, it really requires the ability to see the workplace from the bottom up. Okay, if you're doing this all from the top, then you've got this higher level understanding. But when you're doing it from the bottom and you're engaging that, it makes a difference. So top-down approaches are often based on things like programs, where the bottom-up strategies are more process-focused. So I want us to look at a top-down messages. A lot of times when the messages come down from leadership, sometimes there may not be as inclusive with the bottom. And so I want to look at a few of the messages that the top-down may give and how perhaps the bottom-up might be interpreting that. So the resistance, before I say that, the resistance on this path from like the top to the bottom, I mean, sometimes it can be very strong. Literally, there could be a period where everything just stops. Like you had this great initiative, things are going, and then it stops. And it maybe for several years, it could stop, maybe even months too. And sometimes when this happens, it stops because there's some type of a problem. And so the efforts have to be re-energized. So think about if you've got initiatives that are going and all of a sudden they've stopped or slowed down, now you got to have it re-energized. But how do you do that? So during this period of inactivity, employees will usually say, oh, well, this is just another program of the month that's gone by the wayside. So, for example, the top-down's message to the workforce may be, our workforce must represent the labor force and customer base, where the bottom-up's reaction to that could be preferential treatment quotas for some groups. That's how they might see this message from the bottom up. The top-down might say, we need to create a culture of inclusiveness. And the bottom up may translate this as being including others means some of us who used to be included will now be excluded. Maybe a top-down message is diversity is a good thing for the business, but the bottom up may see this as diversity diverts our attention from our main business goals. Because remember, some of the employees who are not engaged or believe or support diversity may just see this as something that's taking us away from our true goals as an organization. Maybe the top-down's message is each of us must examine our biases and stereotypes and work towards valuing and respecting others, where the bottom-up may translate this as saying, there is something wrong with me, and I am being asked to change my core values, who I am. Perhaps another top-down message is, we must be socially responsible as an organization, which is very true. But the bottom-up might translate this as saying, the company is going to waste money on programs that will take away from profits and my raise. So it becomes very personal when you get this resistance. This resistance that happens when it's not addressed, your initiatives don't have any movement forward. So it's really important to understand it can't just be from the top down. It has to include the bottom up as well. Okay, let's look at this idea of assessing the DEI leader readiness. We, and when I say we, I mean the collective we make the assumption that a leader is ready for a DEI initiative. And we know that most of the time they're just not. So to become invested in diversity and equity and inclusion, managers, they really have to be fully engaged at the beginning of the process, at the beginning of the conversation. So your DEI programs must be established as a business, not just for HR as an initiative, but also company-wide, so that they understand what are the benefits, spell out the benefits to the managers and the organization, so it's very clear about our why. So you want to, if you could, in the Q&A, I want you to look at this article that was a brief portion of an article from SHRM. And what I'd like for you to do is in the Q&A, I want you to give me your thoughts around what this says about a leader's readiness. So according to this 2022 Global Cultural Research Report that SHRM put out, it said that nearly 9 in 10 workers, that's about 87%, indicated that their manager contributes to setting their work team environment. And that's true. If you work in any company, you know it's the management that sets the tone. But there are some troubling signs with this, because what they also say is that more than 4 in 10 workers, listen to that, 4 in 10 workers, that's 42%, have actually witnessed inconsiderate treatment of a coworker by a manager in the past year. So, of course, SHRM, like the rest of us, cautions the idea that, think of this, inconsiderate behaviors like bullying or gossiping or destructiveness, if they're left unaddressed, it causes a problem. It grows, right? So when supervisors are untrustworthy, or if they're insensitive to the needs of their workers, it isn't long before the environment becomes toxic. Now, think about an environment like this, and you have initiatives like diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility. What does this say to you? If you could in the Q&A, what does it say about a leader's readiness if these are the behaviors that are occurring? Get you to respond for us in the Q&A. What does this say if this is a type of an environment? And oftentimes when this happens, sometimes it's unaddressed, and that creates even more of an issue. So in the Q&A, share with us, what does this say about a leader's readiness? And because we have a lot of HR people in the group, we know that they're typing a large amount of information, so we're going to give you that opportunity to do so. What does this say about a leader's readiness?
Well, from my perspective, means that, you know, they're not ready. They need to learn how to become a better leader, especially since if they're in a place of power and decision making to decide on whether or not to move forward with these, you know, for a DEI strategy, for example. It's shocking that, I mean, I had no idea about this percentage, that basically almost half of the workforce feels uncomfortable at work, and they don't have that, you know, that relationship with a manager to fully feel comfortable, which is an important aspect of the job if you want to retain your employees.
That's exactly right. I love the way you said that, because all of this barks under the door of retention as well. So it has an impact. If you have programs around diversity and you don't have employees that participate because of this type of behavior, then it has an adverse effect. And in the Q&A, thank you, Sharonda, she says that a leader is not ready or may not even know how to turn around the environment, which is such a powerful statement. When a leader does not even recognize that their behavior is having an impact on the culture that ultimately is the seeding ground for your DEI program, then there's a systemic problem there that needs to be addressed before you can even get to the point. So you have to really understand, are my leaders even ready for the initiatives that are involved with a DEI program without you assessing that? So it's really, really important to do that. And thank you for that. You know, when you have an organization that is, and I'm going to use an analogy, that is baking or developing the DEI initiatives, and you believe that you are ready to pull it out of the stove or maybe even implement that DEI initiative, and then you discover that the cake wasn't even ready, or in this case, the leader wasn't ready, then you have to go back and check the ingredients, because maybe you missed putting in the eggs. So think about it from that perspective, just a little analogy for you. All right, let's take a look at the DEI business case. How many of you in the chat, in the Q&A, how many of you have an Apple phone? Anybody? I'm not trying to promote Apple today, but I'm just saying, how many of you have an Apple phone? Let's see if a few of you have an Apple phone. Do you, as you're responding, do you believe that Apple sells their phones only to certain groups of people? I'm going to collectively say the answer is no, right? That's not what they do, right? Now, in a Deloitte Insight article, it's that Apple says that the most innovative company must also be diverse, right? Because they know that new ideas, they come from diverse ways of seeing things. So think about that. If they only sold to certain people, then it's a very niche market, but they are broadened in their thinking because they recognize, as we should recognize, that a diverse group of people brings about diversity of thinking. And this perspective is really about looking beyond the demographics of the ultimate outcome and really looking at diversity of thinking. So when you're thinking about making a business case for DEI, you want to target it from a financial perspective. Through 2022, 75% of the organizations with frontline decision-making teams that reflect, I'm going to say, like a diverse and inclusive culture, they're going to, and this was the projection in 2022, that those types of companies will exceed their financial targets. Gender diverse and inclusive type teams outperform gender homogeneous types of organizations, less inclusive teams by 50%. So think about how much diversity can have an impact financially. When you're trying to make this business case, look at it from that perspective as well. Differences in ages, bringing diversity into the workforce is an effective business strategy, right? Because the differences in employees in their performance between non-diverse and diverse organizations, according to statistics, is about 12%. And there were some similar improvements when there is the intent to try and increase those factors. So when you try to increase the diversity in your organization, of course, you're increasing diversity of thought, but you're also being able to make a business case that we're not a one size fit all, right? Having teams with diversity of age, diversity of gender, race, ethnicity, even the geographic differences, national comfort, different types of cultures, that reflects on a very broad user base that company has. And so this turns out in a way that it allows the organization to be better in serving the customers and consumers that use your products. Look at Apple as an example of that. And then when you're creating inclusion, when you think about DEI types of initiatives that not only focus on diversity, they also need to ensure that your employees, the staff, the people that are part of your team, that are from all different backgrounds, that they feel a strong sense of belonging. So when people feel like they are like a part of a team, and that their opinions matter, they're most likely to be productive. They're most likely to be more engaged in their job, right? So some companies, you have like your go-to people, and the people that are just as effective in their roles don't get the opportunity to show their skills. So when you're making a business case around inclusion, it means engaging everyone from every background. It doesn't mean that you're going to do or implement all of the ideas, but you're including people because that diversity of thought is rich. So as you see on the slide, the impact of diversity and inclusion is highly positive, and it's a plus now more than ever before because organizations are able to extend their reach in terms of who works for their organizations in a more geographic fashion. So I don't just have to hire someone in Chicago or Atlanta if that's where I am. I can hire someone from Barcelona to be a part of my organization, and look how diverse and rich that becomes. So those are some of the components to think about when you're making a business case. The next one is when we talk about, and I want to give you like some practices that you can adopt that can really help you to effectively build and maybe sustain the diversity and inclusion in your teams and across the organization. And so one of those is just to be able to promote the benefits of inclusion. People always want to know, like, what's in it for me? We call it the WIFM. What's in it for me? So what you want to be able to do is to link the inclusion directly to the core company values. You can use traditional communication methods like posters. Some companies still have posters or brochures or maybe even direct emails, videos to try and drive this inclusion message. Maybe you even do videos with diverse groups of people in your organization. They're just having a conversation. You promote that. So promoting it helps people to understand what's in it for me. Then another way you could do that is to celebrate inclusive behavior. You want to celebrate all inclusive, I can't get my words out, all inclusive behaviors or success and the progress that you make in trying to adopt these inclusive behaviors, no matter how small it might be. Give that person, or maybe it's even the team, 10 minutes of glory. For example, maybe during a meeting or maybe even a breakfast, you might allow them to share their story of success or their struggle. There's something about the intimacy of a story, a person's life story that connects other people, that allows them to know, I'm pulling down the veil a little bit and I'm just as human as you are. But this practice of engagement, it really helps to build a closer strategy and building a closer relationship to the employees when you're allowing them to celebrate their inclusive behaviors, whatever that might be. Think about how you can do that in your organization. And then another one is just develop training modules on diversity and inclusion. There's a lot of off-the-shelf type of things, and sometimes those alone are not enough. Sometimes you need a little bit more customization so it fits your organization. So you want to encourage some type of an annual training on diversity and inclusion. Don't be afraid to just let the employees explore both the positive and the negative attitudes, because you don't want to place a barrier around people's emotions that they have during these trainings. You want to be able to talk about it. So you got to have a safe environment to be able to explore what comes up from them when they're actually reviewing or participating in these trainings. And then develop some trust through vulnerability. And I kind of shared that when people are sharing their stories, there's a little bit of vulnerability that comes when you know that a person is connecting with you. Be willing to show your weaknesses and even the limitations that you have, even as a leader, which is really important. For those of you that might be familiar with Brene Brown, and she talks a lot about leadership and being vulnerable. There's something about that connectivity that bounces off with other people. You want to encourage team members to just share their distinctive habits or their different ways of doing things as a team. Explore and maybe just debunk some of those stereotypes and encourage people to have open discussions within the comfort of their team. You might have to start small and then develop it out larger to larger groups. And then the last one I'd like to share is just to create an open atmosphere for just sharing and debating. Everyone does not have to agree. And you don't really want a total group that agrees on everything. You need that thought leadership. You need that diversity of thought. So foster an open culture where people from diverse groups, it could be individuals, it could be decision makers, can just freely express their voice and their different ideas. When you have this type of an open atmosphere, what it does is it brings together different perspectives. It can tear down those biases and really create some rich discussion, but don't be afraid of the discussions, right? So if you could in the Q&A, and we're going to continue in the Q&A, what are your thoughts about these 5 practices or any of them? If you could share in the Q&A, what are your thoughts about being able to utilize any of these particular practices in your workplace or just in organizations in general? You could share in the Q&A for us. Just your thoughts. And Pauline, while they're sharing in their thoughts, what are your reactions to any of these 5 practices?
Well, I think from upper management specifically, I think there's, with any new strategy initiation, there's always that initial feeling of risk or fear of, not knowing where to get started, like where on that roadmap, which I think we'll get into later on. But I think that, it's you can start small and those efforts will be recognized, not just from like an internal perspective, but also, from new candidates, for example, just altering your mission and vision, your mission statement. And just, job description, maybe also could be a small detail, putting that little excerpt saying that we value diversity in our workplace. So it's like really small initiatives that could be adapted to any industry, I believe, but it's just, I think getting started is, the first step to it all, which is difficult.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But the key word is getting started, no matter how small or large it might be, getting started. And thank you in the Q&A, the comment was made that great starting points, it's like a roadmap for the organization. So you have to start somewhere. Don't feel as though when you're comparing yourself to others, which I advise you not to do, you have to start from where you are. And so that's really important. I appreciate that. And then the other piece, is bringing in thought leaders, bringing in DEI consultants, also known as thought leaders and experts. Don't assume as an HR person that you're a professional in HR that you should know everything about DEI. You don't even sometimes have the capacity or the time to even focus on DEI. So it becomes very common for some organizations to seek out DEI consultants, experts. These experts, they take the objective look at the organization, right? So they can look at you from the outside in and be able to analyze, look at the efforts that you're making currently, make some suggestions about new strategies. And there are and can be a very essential part of the organization to help create this roadmap that Sharonda talked about in the Q&A, this roadmap for how do you get there. So sometimes you can be so thick into a situation that the forest and the trees just are blocking your vision. An outside perspective can truly help with that. So let's just say, for example, you have things like the outside perspective that can come in and help support committees, as you notice here, by just helping to secure resources. Sometimes an outside voice, when they're speaking to leadership, can help them to drive initiatives around funding to support it, because now they better understand the impact for their organization on a broader basis. Sometimes with the outside perspective, it can help you to identify some specific needs that not only connect you to the community, but connect the community to you, both external communities and internal communities. And then they can help you to really, like you were saying, Pauline, review how you hire people, how you promote, what's your compensation practices, just to ensure that there is inclusiveness and equitableness. And let's say that you've done all these things and leadership still isn't meeting the DEI commitments. Because remember, with a top-down, bottom-up approach, you still need leadership involved. So if executives are skipping meetings, if they're, for example, absent from any of your DEI events, or they've not provided any adequate budget to help you even start these DEI programs and initiatives, then it's going to be really important to address this directly. Revisit the data. If your team doesn't need or meet the DEI goals, I didn't mean to say need, but if they don't even meet the DEI goals, then how will it affect the retention rates and the company's employer brand? So when the executives are not involved, you can't just let that go by the way. So you need to address it, but address it with data, address it with any facts that you can share around the initiatives that you've done so far and how it's impacting the company. All of these things matter. So you have to talk sometimes in numbers to leadership. You have to talk about it in terms of impact, and you have to talk about it in terms of the value to the organization when you're addressing their lack of engagement. So keep that in mind. So those are some of the 5 areas in terms of the development of the strategy. Let's talk about sustainability. So sustainability, when it comes to your DEI, it just simply means that you're creating a cycle of ongoing improvement. And I want to stress the word cycle, because it's not a one-stop shop. You do a training today and you're done. It's a cycle of ongoing activities that have elements of accountability in it. It also has elements of educating both leadership and your employees. And also it's embedded in the culture. So say, for example, here at HRKS, we have a diversity, inclusion, culture, and equity program called DICE. And this solution focuses on sustainable culture change, and it's done through assessing, it's done through strategizing, and it's done through experiential learning, which can be very, very effective. So when you think about a strategy for development, you want to develop a roadmap. And I love that word because Sharonda used it earlier in the Q&A. You want to develop a roadmap for your DEI strategy that includes things that you can measure. Remember, we talked a moment ago from the development perspective, if your executives or leaders are not involved in the way that they should be, you've got to measure your activity, measure the accountability, measure how you're continuing to evaluate and ensure that there is sustainability. Once again, it can't just be a training once a year and you think, yes, we're doing diversity. No, you're really not. So let's just take a look at how you can create more sustainability in the second module in terms of DEI. So when you talk about sustainability and you think about just the word sustainable, that means something that I'm able to maintain that continues to exist, even maybe if I'm not even there. So those that are responsible for DEI should be able to define the company's DEI commitments. What does success look like for our organization? It may not be the same for your organization as it is for others. Look at it within the scope of your organization. Goals should be very specific. They should be measurable and they should be attainable. You've heard of SMART goals. So when you're comparing yourself to companies that are not in either your industry or your size, it's an unfair comparison. You have to start with where you are. You need to be able to understand what the needs are in order for you to meet the company's DEI commitments. And then what would happen if they fail to meet those goals? For example, you could implement, let's say, regular training programs and workshops for your employees. But even if you do that, you want to engage the employees to understand where are you in your understanding of DEI? How can we help support you from that perspective and not assume that everybody's at the same space, right? You also want to be able to collect any type of data that you're going to track. And you want to be able to analyze that from a DEI metrics perspective, such as, for example, representation, looking at your pay equity, advancements in the organizations. The people that are getting advanced, are they in certain groups of people, or is it only certain people that are getting advanced? Looking at your retention. Pauline mentioned earlier about retention of employees. That's really important. Why are they leaving? Is there a tie to this whole idea of diversity that has an impact on their leaving the organization? What about your employee engagement? These are things that you can measure from a DEI perspective, from a metrics perspective. So you want to use this data to be able to just sort of identify areas where progress is being made and where more effort perhaps from the team or just a support or from the budget might be needed. So how can you understand if it's sustainable if you're not measuring where you're growing or where you're not growing? So using data to measure your progress, executives will have a more concrete evidence around how the efforts are actually progressing in your company. Where do they need to support you more? You have to talk in metrics and numbers and give them some data that they can connect to. Then also DEI or HR or people leaders can really establish, I would say, regular check-ins. And regular check-ins could be different in your organization. That could be weekly, could be monthly, whatever the cadence might be. You want to be able to discuss any challenges that you might be having. How can they provide support to the challenges to your DEI initiatives? And what kind of guidance would you need from executives in order to help it to move forward? So once again, what you're doing is you're keeping them engaged. These meetings can be any cadence, as I said, as long as DEI remains at the top of the mind for the company and the leaders. That's important. And that's what the key points of the sustainability really, really means, is keeping it in the forefront and not just a check off once a month, once a year on some kind of a regular cadence. And I want to give you an example of sustainability, at least this process of sustainability. And I like to call this Be Bold. So once again, here at HRKS, under our Diversity Center of Excellence, we have what we call the BOLD experience. And that BOLD stands for Bridging Opportunities to Leverage Diversity. So what we do is we help organizations to create a sustainable culture change and a transition mindset, a transformative mindset. So if you're stuck, like you said earlier when we were asking the questions, if you're stuck, then how do you get from being stuck? How do you transform the mindsets? So the BOLD experience is based on our proprietary learn, be, do methodology. So what this says in short is it's an inside out type of an approach to culture change. So the premise is that sustainable behavior doesn't change as a result of training alone. The behavior will not change just because you train someone. There has to be more than that. That means there has to be continuous learning. And that is the first step, because information, as we all know, is not the same as knowledge. I can have information about something, but it doesn't mean I have true knowledge and understanding around what I've just learned. And then you go to the state of doing. And what happens in the doing stage is it allows the learners now to retain, to be able to practice and kind of, what we like to say is implement what they've learned once the learning has landed. We say this a lot. When you think about a child, when you teach it, when you try to give a child instructions until they actually do it, sometimes it doesn't stay with them until they actually do it. How do you ride this bike? So you put them on it and you show them how to pedal their feet until they do it. Now they've got it. So that's what we call learning that has landed during this experiential learning process. And then over time, just like that child that's riding the bicycle, with consistency, now they're learning, now they're doing, and then there's this sense of urgency. Participants will evolve into a state of being, just like that child now knows how to ride that bike 100%, because now they're being a cyclist. Now they're being more aware in your organization of what it means to experience DEI for myself. So where DEI based types of cultures can be very organic, and also, it also can be a part of how your workforce understands you are. That's why I asked that question earlier. If I were a candidate applying for your company, how would I know that your company even values diversity? So it's got to show in the organization on a broader basis. That's why we call it the learn, do, be methodology, BOLD. Okay. So what types of questions do we have? When you think big picture about DEI strategy development, you want to be able to not only think about those components that I shared, but what are some of the things that you have as a question around what we shared today? You can share that with us in the Q&A. Types of questions. And of course, Pauline, you're more than welcome to engage on any reflections of what we shared or any questions that you might have as well.
I definitely have a few questions if our participants do not. I also see in the Q&A a couple people answered the previous question as well.
Oh, great. Let's see, we have Lee, who says that an open atmosphere where employees are encouraged and rewarded for sharing their ideas, even when they differ from other perspectives, is key to diversity and inclusiveness. I absolutely love that. You can almost feel that answer, right? If I feel included, I'm going to feel like I want to share more. Thank you for sharing that, Lee. And Talandria says, all of these practices are good and stackable. I like that word, stackable. It is hard to create an open atmosphere to debate ideas and views, especially if the organization does not have a culture of trust and safety. That is such a powerful statement, Pauline, because if I don't feel safe, then I'm not going to say anything. And you lose as a company, right? You lose because you don't get the value of my perspective because I'm not going to share that because I don't feel safe. That is so powerful. What were you going to ask, Pauline?
Yeah, I was just going to ask from your experience and from the success of your customers and clients, are you able to provide some specific measurable HR KPIs that our participants could walk away with used to sustainable DEI?
Absolutely. I tell you one that comes out the most when we start with an organization who doesn't have a sense for where their diversity is. They think what they've done has been effective and they're not really sure. We start off with an assessment. So we do an employee engagement that's DEI based, right? So we're asking questions because the key is to understand where are the employees in this process. It becomes like the baseline. And as we're working with them around strategies and doing different activities, one of the KPIs then becomes the level of engagement with the employees around diversity. So you get the baseline, we implement these activities, and then we do another measurement to kind of see how has the pendulum shifted any in order to see if there's more engagement. The key to the engagement is also asking the employee, what would you like to see more of? because that inevitably increases the engagement as well. Because I feel like you're listening to me now. Great question, Pauline.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question from Robin here. What are some measurements to evaluate if someone is a leader?
That is a great question. We talked about, I love that, because we talked about, first of all, if your leaders are going to be key to your DEI initiatives, don't assume because they're a leader, they're ready to lead this. We have seen in many, many organizations where leaders want to shy away from DEI types of challenges because they're not comfortable. So one way to measure it is to really talk about what's involved being a leader in this DEI initiative. Look at where they are in terms of their progress within the organization. A lot of this becomes coaching. We do, for example, leadership team coaching so we can delve to it in a safe environment. Remember, I'm a leader. I don't want others that are either reporting to me to believe that I don't know how to move forward as a leader. So you've got to create a safe environment for leaders, and what we can do, and oftentimes, is to put them in leadership groups where we're talking at a deeper level about this content. We're training them, right? Because as we're training them, we're understanding where there are deficiencies. For example, we're doing some trainings now with various organizations, and we're starting at some of the basics like microaggressions and macroaggressions. We're looking at allyship and biases. And what we're learning is the things that they thought that they knew, when you put them in a workplace environment and give examples around that, it's like moments come about, right? So when you talk about measuring and evaluating, it's really going to start with some of these coaching opportunities and also the training specific to leaders at a more foundational level. And then you allow them to open up and ask questions. And we see this happening all the time where we're creating this environment for the leaders to be vulnerable. Because I don't want you to think that I don't know that I can't do this, but if I'm in an environment where others thinking the same thing, then my readiness becomes more evident because I'm growing. And so that's one way to do it, is to put them in a safe environment that they can do that. It's not necessarily an assessment. There's also actually an assessment that we can do to really get a sense for where the leaders believe that they are. So we can customize an assessment around a leader's readiness, but it's always going to be training involved with that. Finding out where they are, being able to train them up so that they're an effective part of your organization and moving your initiatives forward. Great question, Robin. Thank you for that. Any other questions?
From the poll here, the welcome poll, I see that most of our attendees here today are here to learn more about implementing long-term sustainability of DEI initiatives. So I really think that you tackled on that topic. I mean, that was an excellent presentation. Are there any last key takeaways as to how someone could get started today? If they
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to truly thank all of you for just allowing me to share more about the importance. We believe in this topic. I don't understand really how you can operate as an organization without valuing diversity of your population. Like, everyone in your organization brings value, and you want to explore that in value. That's the inclusiveness. That's the developing the sustainability piece. And so what I would say to that is that to get started is to really have a conversation around where they are. And I want to offer you some opportunities to help you get started. So if you can notice somewhere in that sliding glass door, there might be a QR code. If you can see it there it is right on the door. If you can scan that with your camera and complete the very, very brief survey, and I'm going to send you this presentation. But as a bonus, you will also be able to select 2 other complimentary items, but that's only if you complete the survey. So one option would be for you to get a complimentary session to talk about some initiatives that are on the horizon with your organization, or it could be a 1-hour complimentary leadership roundtable that we do with your organization just to help you to explore that. So if you find the picture of the QR code on the sliding glass door, then you can complete that for us, and we will be absolutely happy to help you to figure out where you are and to help you to explore that. Of course, our website is listed there for you if you would like to engage with us further, but we would be happy to do that. And of course, we definitely want to thank you for joining, right? Pauline.
Yeah. Thank you guys. And I put HRKS's website in the chat for you to click on directly, and Artie's LinkedIn profile if you have any questions that we weren't able to answer today. And scan this QR code if you want to book your demo to start automating your HR processes and systems so you can focus less on tedious work and more on your people. What really matters in any organization. So all right, that sums it up. Thank you so much, Artie. Really, I want to express my sincere gratitude for really this empowering presentation. I think that this was definitely valuable for us all, and we can all improve on our current DEI strategies in our organizations. This was super impactful. So thank you for being a valuable contributor to this conversation. And thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us, and enjoy the rest of the day. And I hope to see you on our upcoming webinars.
Thank you, Pauline. Wonderful job. Appreciate you all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Bye.